All right, thanks for sitting down with me for this conversation, Mark. For those that don't know, I'm today speaking with Mark, who also goes by Goodgis on YouTube and other places. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How about yourself?
Doing well. Thank you.
Awesome.
So, for folks who may not be familiar with you and your YouTube channel and game development stuff that you do, could you do a quick intro, little pitch on yourself and just tell the folks who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I am it's funny, I'm a professional graphic designer, but on the side, I have a YouTube channel where I just talk about my game dev journeys, and I try to encourage and inspire people along the way, with their own projects. And one thing I really like to focus on are like the flaws that I'm going through and, ways that you can overcome them. Because I know a lot of people, it's tough. Game design's tough. But ultimately, my dream is to create my own like studio, and I have one called Firith. It's small. We're growing slowly, but my goal is to become like the new Nintendo, like Neo Nintendo. um, just because Nintendo has been like such a huge inspiration in my life, and that's always been my dream. So yeah, and YouTube is just something I kind of stumble upon, and it's been fantastic. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. I really like the wanting to position as like a new Nintendo. Don't we all?
Yeah.
That's the dream.
I just think they have such like an excellence for quality, and like it's hard. Even there's a lot of fantastic indie games out there, but still they just have this level of charm that most games I think lack. Or like, I don't want to say that they lack, but they don't have that level of polish and like security and safety from a game. But yeah, that's what I'm definitely trying to shoot for. I don't know how long it'll take me to get there, but I'll get there someday.
I believe it, man. Yeah, it's really interesting. There's sort of like that like Nintendo quality, that indescribable Nintendo feel to everything that they do. That's, like you said, really comforting. Feels like home in a way.
For sure, yeah.
Cool. Well, tell me a little bit more about Firth for folks that aren't familiar with the studio and the stuff that all of you are doing there.
Yeah, so Firth started about, I'm trying to think, like 3 or 4 years ago. And we started out making an MMORPG, or I should say an MORPG, because it wasn't massive, but we made this side-scrolling multiplayer game called Fantasy World, and it was like Club Penguin if it was like a side-scroller like Maple Story, and you could level up and wear hats. And my whole childhood, my brother and I, we always wanted to make our own game studio. We started out making like card games, and I think they're called like Super Cards, Power Cards, very unoriginal titles. That was kind of a rip off of Pokemon, and we always wanted to make our own studio, and we went by a bunch of different titles, but eventually, at first my brother was like the guy in charge, but we eventually all went our own ways, and we kind of got busy, and my friends used to be really involved, and it wasn't until we started making this online game, Fantasy World, that we kind of got the gang back together. But this time my brother's like, nah, he's like, I don't want to run it. It's like, if we're going to do this, he's like, I want you to run it. I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. And it just kind of started out as just a fun hobby of like, hey, let's make some games. We're all really passionate about games. I think there's 8 of us total on the team. And then it just kind of blossomed into like getting better and growing and creating more stuff. And we've created everything from like mobile games to video games to board games, and we've even made like tabletop role-playing games, and we're just trying to find what really fits our business well, and we definitely want to get back to making online games, MMOs or MOs, but yeah, it's just kind of been a journey of trying to, I don't know, try to grow a studio. People are like, you're crazy. You're going into game dev. You should just be trying to support yourself and not trying to support a studio. But
Yeah.
it's just a dream for me. And every day, every month, we get closer to that goal. So it's exciting.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And I find it interesting too that you have this sort of split between like board game tabletop stuff and like on the complete other end of the spectrum, like multiplayer online games and that whole thing. Do you guys have a preference for working on one or the other? Or is it just sort of like, you stumbled upon an idea and that's what felt right at the time?
I think we just like, I don't know. We love to experiment. We love to try different things. And it's our number one thing is we're just trying something different. And, it's hard making a game in a genre that a lot of people create because there's a ton of competition. Mm-hmm. So if you push hard and work in an area that other people maybe struggle to get into, like online games, for example, you have a better chance of having success, even if you have like an okay game. And I still have like a deep passion for making online games. And that's eventually our goal is to like go back and create some more. Like it's funny, we made Fantasy World and that lasted for about a year or two. We made it in this like web-based like JavaScript language, there's drag and drop language engine called Construct 2. And then after that, someone's like, we had to pay for servers and all this stuff. There's a lot of cost to online games.
Right.
So we thought, and it was super buggy, like the platforming was really buggy, but we had a loyal fan base. So we thought, someone was asking if we could release the servers, and I'm like, no, I'm just going to make a new game, a new online game. And that was Whizbirds, our second game. And the Whizbirds community is like 10 times bigger, maybe even more than our original community. And they still pester me to this day for updates on the game. And they still play it on a somewhat regular basis.
Wow.
So it's cool to create something, an online game, creating experience. And maybe this is kind of a good answer to the question of like an online game, you get to play it while you're working on it. And I think that's so much fun. Like you get people's reactions. You're putting out updates. People like, oh, I got this hat. I got this thing. And it's like it's a really fun experience. And I feel like tabletop or board games are the exact same way, where you're playing the game right away with people, with friends, you're getting feedback. And anything like that really motivates me to create, because I love getting feedback of like, oh, this is fun, or what if we did this and that. And it's really hard with like a single player game you're working on. It's just a lot harder to have that like, I guess gratification of having people like play through it and be like, oh, this is fun, unless you're releasing demos or something. Right. So I think games that have like a longer development cycle that people interact with are like just a total blast to make. So I definitely would make more online games. It's in the plan. We have to learn to use better engines instead of like some JavaScript engine. But yeah, and in board games it's like, I don't know. I've had a passion for it. I've always said that a lot of board games are boring. So I was like, it was up to me to make a affordable, entertaining board game. And I would say like the Keeyp, which is the only real board game that we publish, is like one of my favorite board games of all time. And that sounds like really pretentious or something, but I just put so much effort into creating a game that I really am passionate about. Yeah. That like I finally made a game that I'd want to play, which is rare. Like that doesn't normally, like when you're making a game, you're just trying to finish it. You're just like, oh, I just want to finish it. But with the Keeyp, it was more than that. It was like, oh, I made a game and finished it, and it's something I really wanted to play. So
I don't know. That's the best right there.
Yeah, for sure. Like I feel like those are the types of games you want to create. And a lot of times you have to kind of branch out, and I think in a long-winded response to your question, I think like making games in genres that kind of push you and that not a lot of people do is really rewarding. And those are the areas that like our studio just loves. We just love trying new things, instead of just making like another Mario game. Not that there's anything wrong with Mario games. I love them, but I feel like other people can do it better than I can. So.
Yeah, I think what you're saying absolutely makes sense. I think, especially on like finding, things that other people aren't doing. I think basically what you're touching on is like finding a market fit and finding an area of the game market that's not like already oversaturated. For sure. Like platformers, for sure. I think I was watching someone else's video. His name's Auro, Auro, and he was basically pulling up stats on like, here's all of the different genres, I think on Steam, and how saturated each of them are with like number of releases versus dollars sold and all that stuff. Platformers are like super oversaturated, and then like MMOs on the other end were like very very much not saturated and had way higher returns. So it makes sense of why you'd go for that. So yeah, it totally makes sense. And actually, I think that's an interesting point when you're working on, like you guys, I know you are working on Dewdrop, and I'm sure there's other things in the background that you're working on. How much of that was a factor in like what idea you picked to work on? Meaning the market fit or the potential market fit that you think you see?
I think it's a part of it. It's not as big of a part of it as maybe it should be. Like when we decided to make Dewdrop, it was funny. It was working with me, my brother, and one of my college buddies who's a part of our studio. And we were just chatting about like, hey, what would be a simple game that we can make in a month? And we came up with the idea of Dewdrop. Little did we know it would take us way more than a month.
Been there. I've been there.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we decide on stuff, it's just what sounds fun. We don't like to do the same thing twice, really, or at least I don't. So we always try to think of like what's a genre we would want to play, what's a game we'd be interested in, and how can we give a unique spin on it. And I do think if we would have thought about Dewdrop a little bit more before starting it, I think maybe we could take a different approach that would kind of set it apart compared to there's like a ton of Metroidvanias out there now. But I think the cool thing is like, even with working on Dewdrop, yeah, we're making a Metroidvania, we're making a platformer, but instead of like, at first it was trying to be, I don't know, like an actual Metroidvania, but then I realized I'm like, I don't even play Metroidvanias. I play Zelda games. So it's weird. I'm treating Dewdrop almost like a Zelda game now, and I'm taking inspiration from like platformers like Super Paper Mario, which wasn't hugely commercially successful but has amazing dialogue and some cool mechanics to it. And it's like it's finding that niche. It's like finding an area, finding that niche, and putting a unique spin on it is super important. And it's hard, but ultimately, I think even if something is oversaturated, if that's what you want to make, I would say go for it, because I don't know, time and time again, people have proven that you could go and make something in a very oversaturated genre and still have success. So it all comes down to does your game have charm, or does your game feel like a clone or something? Like you're just like a cash grab. You're just trying to make something in a genre just for the money. So
yeah, absolutely. The sort of line that I've been parroting, so to speak, or the thing I've been sort of harping on a lot lately, is that like when you're choosing what game to develop and you're like trying to find a game idea, like when we're talking about that market fit thing, like I try to think about it in terms of how other businesses would think about it and how like entrepreneurs broadly would think about it, which is what problem are you solving for people? So if you're going into a saturated market, like you said, if you have some differentiator, if you have something that is like, so to speak, solving a problem that people have with that genre, then I think it could be totally viable, even if there's a million other games in that genre. Like Hollow Knight was a Metroidvania, Dewdrop's a Metroidvania. It's a pretty saturated genre relative to others, but like if you have something unique and you're, quote unquote, solving a unique problem, I think you definitely have a chance to stand out in that genre.
For sure. Like I think even Stardew Valley is like a great example of like farming simulator games aren't like Stardew Valley is basically Harvest Moon, but Harvest Moon hasn't been that great recently. And so he was like, there was a void there that people really want a game. And he just was there at the right time and created something that was, really high quality. And I think because of it, it just exploded. Like I honestly think if someone made a game like Sonic Adventures 1 or 2 and had like a Chow Garden, like creature raising thing, a game like that would literally explode right now, because there's such a huge need for a game like that. I know it's a lot of work, and that's why not a whole lot of people have done it, but there's certain genres that like definitely there's a void. And if you can find that void and you can tap into it and create something high quality, like you will go above and beyond. And I think like, yeah, I don't know. Most indie titles are like really successful ones are an example of that. So
for sure. And I think the high quality thing that you just mentioned is like the key there, right? Because it's, we talk about these Steam stats, right? For years, I've heard people with whatever metric it is at the time, there's 100 or 1,000 or whatever Steam games released every day, and most of them make 2 cents. How are you ever going to survive putting stuff on Steam and trying to make games? But I think when you look at what those games are and you actually compare the quality between them, I think Steam used to have a big problem with it in the green light days of people would go on like the Unity asset store and basically just grab something from there and like flip it really quickly, right? The whole asset flip thing. I think that's lessened now, but there's still a lot of like stuff that just doesn't get to that polished stage or doesn't get as far into that polished stage that you need to. And I'm finding it with my game now. Like it's been the feature set that I've worked on is basically the same that it was months ago, but it's just been tons and tons of polish and the game feels completely different. So I really agree on the high quality thing. Like I think that's what really makes your game stand out, especially in a saturated genre.
For sure. I think if you just take the time you could have a very short game, very short experience, but if it just feels really put together, people like sometimes it's fun to play a game on like itch.io or something like that is like kind of put together. It's like grade blocked out, low poly stuff that, yeah, like you said, they got from the asset store or something. Yeah. But for the most part, people want a unique experience. They don't want to feel like they're just playing an indie game. They want to be sucked into a story or like, wow, this was really intriguing. It was charming. A great example of that, I think, is like Princess Remedy in A World of Hurt. I can't remember who made it, what studio made it, but it was for a game jam. But just like the level of detail and quality, and the art style is actually kind of funny. It's kind of like a top-down version of Dewdrop, same kind of art style. But it just like it's such a charming game that it stands out, and people will see that. And like my buddy Andrew, who released Tadpole Tales recently with his friend. Yeah, they put it on Steam for free, and I think he just said that they got 100,000 downloads in a month. Wow. Granted, it was a free game, but it just goes to show like they didn't have a huge marketing base. They didn't have like a massive like social media account or anything. They just created something that's super high quality, all hand drawn artwork, and it just really polished. It's a short game, but it's super polished, and people love it because people want quality. They don't want like. Yeah. The more games there are out there, the more you have to like compete with the crowd by making something that's not just like shovelware on the phone or something. Like the mobile market is so guilty of that too, where people just make like the most ridiculous, like how many Flappy Bird clones do you need? But I think if you do that, like even if you have prototypes and they just look put together, I think people think that like, whoa, that's incredible. Like you're really talented or whatever. And it's like, and you don't even have to be the greatest programmer. Just make it look nice. And the rest you can figure out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The free Steam thing is interesting because I had friends do the same sort of thing. They released a roguelike called Super Raft Boat. And they found a very similar thing. Like they put it up for free on Steam. They, did the usual like tweet about it or whatever, but not much. And same thing, like hundreds of thousands of downloads in the first month or whatever. Discord blew up. It's really interesting what a free Steam game that's not, that has some effort put into it can do. It's really, really interesting.
For sure.
Cool. I do want to go back to something that we talked about in the earlier part of the conversation. If I'm not mistaken, you said you work a full-time job and then part-time you do game development, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I do the same sort of thing. I think you said you're a graphic designer, and then I do project management by day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I think I have a I have some perspective on doing this, but I'm really curious to get yours. Like, how do you manage that balance? Because it is difficult to do both things at once.
Yeah, it's definitely so. I think first and foremost, I wouldn't be able to do any of this if I wasn't working from home right now.
Yeah.
I think just my work is about an hour away, and just the drive and the commute, it ends up being like a 10-hour day, and I'm always exhausted when I come back home. But being able to work from home, I have a lot of flexibility. My work is number one priority. I want to make sure that I'm always doing a great job, and I never want my game dev stuff to interfere with my work. That would look terrible. I don't want to lose my job. I'm going to keep being able to do what I'm doing. So, that's frustrating sometimes when you got to get something done, you got to get out a video, you got to, you got sponsors, and like, hey, can you put out this video on Friday? And you're like, oh, okay. And, or, there's people that want to see more updates on videos, or you got to manage the Discord. There's always something going on.
Right.
And it's a ton of work. I think one thing that's really helped me, and something that a lot of people don't see, is that this is when it's really nice to have a studio. And this is actually how the studio has become more of an actual business, where I contract out people in the studio to help do work. Every once in a while, my brother, who used to do professional editing, he'll step in, he'll edit a video or two when I need it. I have my team help manage our Discord. We have some great moderators on there. Like, I'm trying to delegate as much work as possible whenever we have like partnership opportunities, or like there's meetings or something. Yeah, I try to delegate that. I think the main thing is, and that doesn't always work. You don't always have a team of people that are willing to do work. But I think the number one problem when you're working like two jobs basically is that you feel like you need to move fast. You feel like, oh, we just need to get this out. We need to do this. And sometimes you do. Sometimes there's a window, and you got to hit that. You got to hit that deadline. But I think the main takeaway that I'm realizing, and that talking to other game devs, is that there's periods that you push and there's periods that you rest, and you just kind of like take your time. You don't. There's always endless pressure with YouTube to feed it. It's like a monster that never can be quenched or whatever. So you're constantly feeding it. And when you're gone, you have like this fear of like, oh, my channel's going to blow up, or someone's going to hack into, or like everyone's going to leave.
Yeah.
And granted, you want to be consistent. You don't want to be gone for 5 months or not do, post anything. But
right.
I think it's realizing like, hey, I'm getting there one step at a time. If I don't put a video out this week, or don't do a stream, or don't get working on this thing or that thing, it's going to be okay. And it's going to work out. I'll make a post, whatever. Like, people aren't going to disappear.
Right.
I think maybe the hardest balance for me is, I already have a limited amount of time. I probably work 3 or 4 hours a day on, Firith and Goodgis stuff. Depending on, the day. So it ends up being some days like 12-hour days, and you just like, or even longer, and you just kind of burn out. But, I always remind myself why I'm doing it. I do it because I love it. And this is something I'm really passionate about. And, balancing the game dev with YouTube is tricky, in that short amount of window. Cause I'm like, I gotta work in Dewdrop, but I have 100 other things that need to get done. So I have a calendar like that I printed out. It's actually just in like a little picture frame, and it has little icons of things that I need to do that day. So like for example, on Monday, it has like a little icon for like social media stuff. So that every morning I check all my social media. I try to reply to as many comments as I can before I get like a little overwhelmed. And then my goal is to work on 3 hours of Dewdrop the rest of the day. So I kind of schedule it out of, hey, if you can at least get an hour or two done, even if you don't feel like it, at least you're making progress. If you spend more time, that's great. And if you don't, that's okay. Like, you can catch it up later. But I think really it's hard, and it's hard managing it. I think it would be a lot easier if this was, my full-time gig, for sure. But I'm grateful for my opportunity, like opportunities that I have. And it's good to get away and just kind of clear your mind and not think about it too much. And like I said, if you gotta wait 2 weeks to do something, it's okay to delay things. That I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's okay if things don't magically happen like tomorrow. So, but
yeah, for sure. I've definitely I definitely relate to that very much. I think the game dev YouTube piece is the really tough one that I'm still trying to figure out, because like the way that I've sort of structured it, and it sounds like you do something similar based on what you were saying. Like the way that I structure it during the week is like, obviously I've got, the set time that I have to be doing stuff for the day job. So I find that in the morning, first thing in the morning is when I can really focus on stuff. So I tend to get up, I think like 6:30 or 7 or so is when I'll be up and starting to work on game dev stuff. And I still find like trying to figure out when to do the YouTube stuff or do, TikTok now and whatever. There's so many social media things all at once to try to do. I find it so difficult to find that the time to balance between the two. Do you do a sort of thing of like, focus, let's say this 1 week on working on YouTube stuff, and this whole week is just like, I'm going to get YouTube stuff done, and then after that switch back to game dev for a bit? Or is it a little more like day to day or than that?
I think I'm the type of person I need at least like 3 hours to work on something, like with game dev. Like it's hard to just jump in for a half an hour and do something. So what normally happens is, if a video goes out that week, then I have to figure out like, is there a sponsor? Who are we working with? Is it a collaboration? Do I have all the resources? Record the audio for the video. Figure out editing situations. Like I said, it's been a huge help having an editor now, like for my videos. So if I'm just too busy, I really like editing, but it takes me like 15-20 hours sometimes.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Like if you're gonna edit, you have to do a good job. And like I'll be working on it and I'll be like 3 hours in and I'll only have 30 seconds. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
oh my god.
it's very time consuming, and that's stressful when you have deadlines. But I think I've done a horrible job at this, but I just kind of prioritize what needs to go out the door, fastest. Like, in my opinion, this, and there may be a lot of game devs listening that may think that this is terrible, but marketing is like the number one important thing about your game. If you have 1 million people following you and you have no games, that's a good place to be in, because then you could just make something. It doesn't have to be crazy. You could make a game when you have that following, and boom, you're a successful dev right there. Like you could sell enough copies from your fan base or whatever, your support group. But if you have the best game ever and you try to promote it and you really have, no audience, it's really hard. And I've done it in the past. I've made, we've invested like a year or two developing really polished games, really cool experiences. Got, like no one said anything. There was no feedback. Because you're just like, you're screaming with a bunch of voices screaming around you louder, and it's hard to compete with. So I think for me, I go through seasons where I'm really into the game dev stuff, and I just work on experimental stuff, which ends up turning into a video eventually, or I'm learning new things which I can apply to Dewdrop. But I go through a season of like a week or 2 or 3 where I'll just bust out. I can work when I'm actually focused, I can work so fast. But it's getting to that place. So I feel like it's like a month of YouTube stuff and like a month of game dev or business related stuff. Cause that's another thing that people don't know. Like the more you get into this, the more you make money. Well, then you gotta, you should be incorporated, get an LLC or get something. And then you got accounting and balancing the checkbooks. And then if you're paying people, you got to figure that stuff out. You don't get audited. Like, and there's just so much to manage. And it becomes a lot. I've actually found that the business side has become just as big as the YouTube and the game dev side, where it's like I spend just as much time like balancing the checkbook and working with partnerships and stuff like that, to kind of grow that business, where it's like, man, I wish there was three of me. I wish there was a game dev me, an editor me, and a business version of me. So I think it's I don't know, man. It's tricky. I think like I said, it's especially hard when working a full-time job. But I think this should be encouraging to a lot of people out there, because if you're in school, or if you're not in school, if you're working a part-time job or something like that, then you have more than enough time to actually sit down and do this. It just takes discipline. And it's a blast. It's worth it. It's not like I'm torturing myself like, oh, I gotta make a game. it's what I love doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could go back to my past self in college and be like, stop that. Go work on your game instead. Go make a game. Damn it.
Yeah. It's hard. I was that guy that like everyone was always like going out, they're partying or they're going to events or doing these things. And I used to go to basketball games. I enjoyed watching basketball. I'd hang out with friends, of course, but I was like, my winter break was just making online games.
Yeah.
I just was like so laser focused of what I wanted to do. Yeah, but I honestly think like anyone could do it, and you can you just have to sit down and get started, and it only gets easier over time. So,
absolutely agreed. Yeah. To be fair to myself, like my college days, I spent a lot of time trying to go to like networking events, and I think I was at some point for a period of a year or two, I was working like 2 part-time jobs and was like also doing classes, and so it was a lot. But if the majority of folks may be in a better position than that while they're in school and can afford to focus more time, they absolutely should if they're interested.
For sure. Yeah.
Something that you were talking about was the marketing component that I want to touch on a little bit more. So you talked about having an audience and no product is better than having a product and no audience, which absolutely agreed. With your audience, like I actually trying to think of when I found your channel. I think I found your channel right after you did the scope creep video, which I believe is like one of your biggest ones at this point. So like, how did you get the audience on YouTube? Was it like through that video? Was that really what kickstarted things?
Yeah, so it was kind of a weird experience, because when I first started doing YouTube, I didn't want to. I was like, I really just don't want to sink the time, but I just felt like I needed to. I was like, no, you need to sit down and do this. So if you go back and listen to my first video, I'm like monotone and I sound disgusted. Like I wasn't happy to make that first video. But the first thing I did with that video was I posted on Reddit. Got some horrible, mean comments. It was great. People still viewed the video. It kind of gave enough for people to, I guess, check it out and give me a couple subscribers. And then I think the next one I did was I tell about the 2 MMOs I made, and then I can't remember if the scope creep one was the video after that, or no. I think I did one on my mobile game, Conopond, and that video was like my first video that actually was performing well. I think I got 1,000 views. I was like, wow, 1,000 views. And that one started to, I don't know if I think it trended a little bit. And then the week after is when I put the scope creep one. And I think those 2 videos together just did really well. I think the title, I think I just kind of stumbled upon the right combination of the name and the thumbnail and the subject matter. People love survival games. I don't know. Somehow it just picked up. And that was like my first big viral video. And I just remember like sitting, I think it was a Sunday or whatever. I looked, I was like, I got 150 subscribers in one day. And I just was shocked. I'm like, what the heck? Because like I had done YouTube in the past. I did like a Let's Playing channel like 10 years ago. And I did videos on like Chow Gardens from Sonic and stuff like that. But I the most subscribers I ever had was like 80. And so I was just kind of jaded with the whole YouTube thing. So when it did well, I was like, wow. Like, I was just like really shocked. I'm like, why are people listening to me ramble about some game or whatever? So yeah, I honestly don't know. I do think, people ask me this question, like, how did I grow so fast a lot?
Yeah.
And I think part of it was, editing. I think the Scope Creep video, I'm really proud of the editing still to this day. I think editing is just so important. Like taking the time to edit, make a really polished video, make it, design it, make it feel well. I think I have a slightly unfair advantage because I went to school for graphic design. So typographies, I can make it look nice. I took a video editing class, motion design class. And so having that background made it easier. Making thumbnails is like, that's my jam. It's like, that's something I'm used to and kind of familiar with. And so I think to a lot of people, it just looked like it was higher quality than it actually was. It looks put together, but it really wasn't. I didn't even have scripts. I just talked.
Oh, wow.
And I really think that's what made the channel and grew, is like, if you look, there's that saying, like, fake it till you make it, kind of, where if you look really put together and like, what you're talking about, then people will believe it, and it's not like I didn't know what I was talking about. But I just wanted to put, like, when I did my videos, I just want to make sure that thumbnails, everything about the channel just was really high quality, as high quality as I could do it. And I think that with the combination of like the subject matter is, I don't know, when it really picked up. It's weird. I've never, like I said, I've always had terrible luck with YouTube. So I think it was just like right place, right time. And all my past experience kind of thrown together. That kind of made the channel grow. So that's, I hate, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I find it interesting that it sounds like we've had very similar YouTube experiences, because I did the same exact thing when I was in high school, where I like tried to do a Let's Play channel and barely got any traction on that. And I think at one point I started doing like impression videos. Like I started doing like a Mickey Mouse impression and did like a Let's Play with that. And it did well enough. Awesome. Yeah, it did well enough, and it was one of those things where I like set it and forget it and came back at some point. And it's actually the channel I'm using now. I just like deleted all that stuff and rebranded it, but it that's why my channel had jumped to like a few hundred subscribers with nothing on it now. It's because that's what happened in the past. But yeah, I totally feel the jadedness of like just feeling like you're constantly throwing stuff at this omnipresent YouTube algorithm, and it's so impossible to figure out what makes it stick, and like, why is YouTube not recommending my stuff? What am I doing wrong? So
it's weird too, because like you get depressed sometimes if like performance is down. And who was it? Advice from Danny told a couple of us game devs that he's like, hey, don't look at the stats. It's things that have seasons. There's seasons that things are high, seasons that things are low. You just can't get caught up in that. February is a horrible month. I realize that this sounds weird, but the best months are when kids are out of school. People have a lot more free time, and you can see performances up then. And I think it's knowing if you're just putting you're putting out good work, hard work, and you're proud of it. If you just keep doing it, people are going to find it. If you have good quality stuff. Like I have a buddy he has a graphic design podcast, and which is a rough audience. It's not a huge audience for that type of market. And he has slowly built up his channel. I think he's at 3,000 subscribers over a span of like 4 years. And he'll put out a video. It'll get like 10 views or 5, sometimes 5 views. And he'll put out like 2 or 3 videos a week. And he'll just continue consistently to put out videos. I'm like, that's just like, he will get there. Like, I know it's slow, but he will get there. If you're just consistent. I think even as a kid, I think I would have grew more if I actually just, kept posting. Like I was getting subscribers, but you're a kid. You just want to have fun and play around or whatever. And I just didn't have the patience. It's especially hard when you put out something and it doesn't get that many views, because it's like you lose motivation to put out the next video. And And that's one of the main reasons why I didn't want to do YouTube, because I didn't want to like make something, it get like 5 views, and then I'm like, oh, I got to make another video. Like that's so depressing.
Right.
It's like, oh, but you know, even if you get 5 views, the experience and what you learn from it is so valuable. And yeah, so I don't know, YouTube is a tricky game. It all comes down to like trying to make your thumbnails and your titles as catchy as possible. You know, you don't want to make clickbait, but you want to make them enticing. You want to be like, oh, how I saved the world with my game or something like that. Like, and it's always like I have a strong, like, I don't know. I never want to become, like I've said this to all my friends and stuff like that. I never want to become an East level YouTuber. That's not who you know, I want to be. I just want to be a guy that makes games and can do it full time. So whenever I feel like I'm leaning towards that clickbait stuff, I try to like dial it back. Like, no. Like, I'd rather just make something cool and have people find out on their own, instead of being like, yeah, I don't know, making some weird cringy, I made a game in 1 minute or something like that. I don't know. That sounds like a fun challenge, but
oh my god, I think I legitimately saw a video like that the other day. That was like, I made a game in 1 minute. Like,
we're all guilty of it. I made my latest video is like, it's like I made a game or a maze with like 900 IQ, and it was kind of a joke because the maze wasn't hard. It was the people in the maze that were like really pretentious. But it's just like, it's like, I don't know. You try things, but I don't know. It's just kind of a journey, I guess.
It really is. So I guess to pull out like lessons from that, would you say that the most important things are like thumbnail, title, like actually we'll even bucket that more, like presentation, and then the other piece being consistency? Would you say those are like the two most important things for someone that wants to be doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you just spend like a long time just making really high quality videos, like you edit, you spend at least 10, 15 hours editing. I know that sounds crazy, but doing it, making sure, like, don't have a 20-minute video. If you can only edit 5 minutes, then make it 5 minutes. Like, I think that's a mistake. It's like, everyone's like, well, 20-minute videos are the most optimized. You get the most ad revenue or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. If you can't edit a 20-minute video well, then make it shorter. You know, make your thumbnails interesting. I think too often people try to copy other people's thumbnails. It's easy. Like, I think you should study like 6 or 7 people, what they're doing with their thumbnails, and then find your own style, your own layout, how you put your type, kind of create a brand for yourself. And that's where like I said, the designer part kicks in, is creating that brand. And then think of a title. Like, would you want to click a video that says like, I made a game today? Like, I don't know. Or if like, being very specific about the game you're making tends to work well. Like, I'm working on a whale dating sim or something like that. Like, that's like, okay, that's weird. Like, I'll check that out. Like, so being very specific about what you're working on, and staying away from like, I made a game in 48 hours. Like, that's great. Those are cool videos, but there's a million of them now. So like, what's something new you can do? So I think first and foremost, it's like your thumbnail and your title are your most important thing in the video, because if they're bad, no one's going to click. You could have the best video ever, but no one's going to click it if you have, you know, a bad thumbnail. And then next, make sure your video is high quality. Make sure you're not just like, it's a 3-minute video and 60 seconds is just an ad for like a sponsor. Like, that's horrible. Like, make sure it's quality. Make sure people are learning something, or you're showing something, you're giving something to the audience. And then yes, consistency. I think when I first started, I put out 5 videos in the first month that I started, and that helped me. I think I hit 1,000 within my first month, just because I was posting videos so often. Now I've taken a step back a little bit, just because it's a lot of work. But when summer picks up again, I think I'm going to try to go back to weekly videos if I'm crazy enough. So consistency is really important. And also people want to see you, they want to know what's going on. And also, if you do take a break, that's great too, because sometimes taking a break, when you come back, people are just really stoked to see you again. And it kind of refreshes things. So I think those are the main things. Like if you're making a series and it's not doing well, you just experiment, try different videos. But I think it's just focusing on quality and quantity instead of, just quantity. So.
Yeah, I think what you said there about like being really intense with it and uploading a lot in the beginning, and then after seeing some growth, like sort of pulling back and then being at like a stable cadence. That seems to be what several people have sort of said very similarly, that they started out really pumping stuff out and then had a hit or a couple hits on their hands, and then they pulled back and were able to dial back and just maintain, and then it was like steady growth from there. Do you think that's sort of the way to approach it? It's like go all out, focus on it really hard, and then once you're at a good spot, then start sort of pulling back to something that's more comfortable?
Yeah, I think so, because like when I first was putting out videos, there kind of weren't a ton of devlogs at the time. Like I think Danny hadn't posted in like a couple months. Like all the big devlog guys hadn't posted in a while, and I was posting every week. On the same day, I was posting, I think, on Wednesday. And so people got used to seeing my thumbnails. And there's a thing in YouTube called chaining, I believe, where if your thumbnails look similar to another thumbnail, it's kind of weird. And maybe there's speculation, maybe it's rumor or whatever. But if you make your thumbnail similar, then YouTube will recommend that video next. And you could like, it's really good if you have like an old viral video. Like if I made like a new video that I know is going to perform well, and I make it look similar to my scope creep video, old viral videos will become viral again. It's really weird. It's confusing. I don't know if it's just like people made it up, but I have noticed it does work. And I think if you're putting out weekly videos, you're kind of like the video that week does really well and you get momentum into the next week. And then if you put out another video, then you're just like doubling your momentum. And like I said, if you're doing that chaining technique, sometimes you can, an old video like that's a couple months old will start picking up momentum again. And you really need that. Like it's almost like every time you put out a video and it's been a long time, it's like starting up a car again. And it's really hard on the engine to start it up. It just takes a bit. Like rebooting your channel 100 times it's really difficult because viewers are having a hard time getting back into it. They don't want to see 10 apology videos about how you forgot to upload or something. Like it's hard. Like,
Yeah.
And like I have a friend who was like that. He rebranded his channel like 4 times, and he keeps rebooting and stuff. And he's got I think like 50,000 subscribers. He's on a game dev. He does Minecraft videos and stuff, but because he keeps rebooting it, he's stunting his growth. So I think you just have to keep pushing through it. And like, there's times like when I put out a video, I know I need to put out a video the next week, even if I don't want to. Because I did I switched to a bi-weekly schedule to kind of give myself a break. But there's times that I'm like, this video is doing really well. If I wait 2 weeks, and I post a video, I'm not going to grow as fast. And it's true. Like you don't. There's something about getting that momentum where if you get a bunch at once, YouTube really likes it. It's like, hey, we're going to recommend you to everyone. So I think that's a huge part. And there was something, oh no, there's another thing I was going to say that's actually really useful, but maybe it'll come back to me.
Yeah,
the greatest tip.
The best thing I ever thought of ever.
Yeah.
I forgot. Oh, those are the worst moments. Yeah, it's really interesting. Oh, go ahead.
That's what it was. It was live streaming. Not only was I putting out weekly videos, but I was live streaming as well.
Yeah.
And I think between that, it got enough views that YouTube is recommending it. So that's another opportunity is live stream. Though I don't really recommend it until you're at least around 1,000 subscribers because it's not worth the effort beforehand because you spend a couple hours live streaming just to have a couple people there. And that's great. It's awesome that you get to hang out with those people. But that's a lot of energy and focus that you could be investing in a stream when you could be investing somewhere else, like working on new videos and working on a game. So, that's definitely a huge part of it as well.
Yeah, it seems like the live streaming works for a lot of folks, and some people with the shorts. I've tried a few of them, and it's just been like re-uploaded TikToks, and they don't do nearly as well as they do on TikTok. But those seem to be ways to sort of like game the system a little bit and try to boost traffic to your channel.
Yeah, I actually haven't tried out the shorts yet. I should just make me eating a sandwich or something. I'll test something out. I think ultimately, if you just keep experimenting, like if something doesn't do well, it doesn't mean you did. Could have been the thumbnail, it could have been the video, it could have been anything. So it could have been the timing, the day of the week. Just experiment with different days. Post on a Saturday, post on a Monday, post on a Wednesday, like post at midnight. Like the main thing is just trying different things. You'll reach different audiences. I think it's hard when you get set in one pattern and you only do that, because then you're missing out on opportunities for, potential, like a better opportunity, I guess. So
yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I noticed too, one of the things that seemed to be most impactful for me so far was like, as my, because I basically have only really focused on a devlog series for the game I'm working on now, because it's sort of like, I don't have much credibility to talk about anything else just yet. At least I feel that way until I have, this game further along. But I've noticed that when I started at the sort of prototype stage with the game and have progressively added more and more art, like as I add art and have more stuff to show in thumbnails, like it seems to perform a lot better than older videos where it was all sort of prototypey stuff. So I think that's sort of the presentation bit that you were talking about, where it's like, if you have a really nice presentation, if things look really polished, if you have interesting art and whatever to look at, that seems to be helping. It seems to help, like click-through rate and all that stuff. So maybe that's something else for folks to think about as well.
Yeah, there's I make a lot of prototypes just because I like doing pixel art and creating like a little experiment.
Yeah.
And I'll show those clips in my videos a lot of times. People are like, what's that game? That looks so sweet. And it's just like, I don't have a full game or anything. I just have these little ideas. But I think because they look polished, they're like, they're almost like, I don't want to say tech demos, but I guess they are prototypes that look kind of, or maybe mock-ups are a better word, where they're just more like art that moves, basic gameplay. I think people just really like that. They, and I think people want to see visuals. It's like, we love iconography, we love imagery. It's hard to look at just code, lines of code, unless you're, even if you made like a roguelike game or rogue game or whatever, it's hard. You got to make your ASCII art look beautiful. It's like, because you're competing with all these other images, I guess, or maybe not. Maybe because it's so different from everything else people are saying that maybe it would do well. But yeah, there is something for like just making something kind of pretty. That's why it takes me forever to make Dewdrop updates, like devlogs, because I want each devlog to look different and feel different. And that means I have to reach a certain level of, I got to make a new location or add a new mechanic where it feels different. Otherwise, it's just like, wow, that looks like your other thumbnail here. It's like, yeah, that's a good point. Like, and if people have seen it once, then they'll assume they've seen that second video too. Like, oh, it looks just like that. It's the same video. It's like, no, it's a new one.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky though.
Yeah, it really is. Cool. Well, so I want to shift a little bit now, because I know we're coming up on an hour. And what I'd like to shift over to is a little bit more of like what advice you would give to folks around sort of game development in general. So I guess from the YouTube thing as a way to segue between that, would you still recommend to people now to pursue YouTube if they're, let's say, trying to do game development? Would you still recommend to folks that like, start the YouTube channel, put stuff out, do the devlogs, do the whole thing? Or do you think that that ship has sort of sailed at this point?
I think so. If you're just getting into game development, I see a trap a lot of kids get into, like, well, I got to start making devlogs day one. And maybe there's room for that. Maybe there's a market of like, hey, watch me learn programming from scratch and like actually developing a game. There's definitely room for that. I think if you're just getting into game dev or pixel art, any of that stuff, I wouldn't get caught up in any of that. I think I would just focus on experimenting, having fun, because there's a lot of pressure with YouTube. There's a lot, like, every devlog I put out for Dewdrop, I get 1,000 comments on what I should and shouldn't be doing. It's hard, and especially if you're younger or if you don't have a good sense of your game, you can get pulled in 1,000 directions. So I think if you're learning, just enjoy the process of learning. Don't be focused on trying to become like an e-celeb or something like that. Just kind of enjoy the process of learning and just, experimenting, making a game, enter jams, join a Discord community. You just like make relationships, and like that's what I did when I was younger, and it really helped me get to where I was at today. Now if you have experience making games and you have a project that you think is cool, I definitely think you should consider doing YouTube. I think what you should try to avoid is avoid doing videos that have already been done. Like, we don't need to see someone make Minecraft in 24 hours again. Like, Sam did it great. Sam Hogan or whatever, he did a great job. We don't need to see like five more versions of the videos. I think people think because that video did so well that if they did it, they're gonna have the same success. That's just like you're chasing a carrot on a stick, and it's like it's not worth your time. Instead, try to find something unique that you can talk about. Like I just did a devlog on a board game that I made, and there's not really any videos, at least that I've seen, about that, and it's done extremely well because people like, hey, we've never really seen this type of video before. And so I think just find a different approach. Maybe it's not doing devlogs like, hey, here's my devlog from start to finish on this game. Maybe it's like each devlog for your game that you're working on talks about a different mechanic or something like that. Or maybe you just maybe you're a composer. Maybe you talk about like the music side of things, or, the game design. I think it's finding a niche inside of this community will really make you stand out. It'll really make you like I said, I always think, and this is how I view it, and maybe this is harsh, but like I think Dewdrop devlogs are boring in my opinion, because it's me talking about a game. It's me like almost like advertising my game, like, hey man, like check out my game and stuff like that. And I feel like I try to make it fun, I try to make it entertaining, but you're trying to get someone interested in basically a product if you think about long term. And it's cool. Right. People want to see the process. But what I try to do is I call it like the triple threat. I try to you try to always entertain. You always want to like you always want your video to be entertaining, like enjoyable. You don't want it to be very boring or dry. You always want to teach something. People want to, when they leave the video, have a little takeaway like, wow, I shouldn't scope creep or whatever. Like, think of something that you can bring up that you did wrong or that you did right that could help people. And then the third thing is just add humor. It's like, I guess that goes into entertainment as well, where it's like, you're creating a positive environment where you're not like my first video where I'm monotone, like, hey, welcome to Dewdrop. Like, you're creating a fun environment where people are like, hey, you're making jokes and stuff like that. And I think if you have those three things, you're adding value. You're giving, helping people out. Like, my pixel art tutorial is my best performing video because I'm just giving professional advice. Like, I went to art school, so I'm giving professional advice that I would learn and just applying it to pixel art. And it's almost like you're giving a service. You're like, hey, take this. This is for you. Yeah. And I think people respond well to that because like, oh, that's awesome. And then they check out your other stuff. So I think it's just finding that niche. Don't try to copy. Copy enough that it feels familiar. Like, copy enough. Like, don't do a devlog where you're just like sitting in your basement cutting out a piece of paper and like, I'm making a board game. Like, don't go too off the beaten path, but make it familiar. So it's like, okay, this feels like kind of like a devlog video. And then talk about a different subject, talk about something different. Or if you're making a roguelike, and like focus on what if it's just like the art. You only talk about art in your videos or something. I don't know. It feels very broad advice, but I think it's just bringing something fresh. YouTube always rewards fresh videos. And I think people they get tired of seeing the same videos over and over again. So if you can create something fresh, it's hard to do. I'm guilty of sometimes making some stale videos. We all do it. But it's just trying things and just experimenting. I think the number one thing is experimenting. So, yeah.
I guess the triple threat that you said, you could put the 3 E's as like experiment, entertain, and educate, or something like that.
There you go.
Do those 3 things, and then you're good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think also what you're sort of touching on is like whatever you make. Similar to how we talked about, finding your spot in the market for your game and like solving that problem and basically providing value that isn't there. I guess it's the same thing with YouTube of like providing that value to people. And that's just like what your thumbnail and title and all that communicates is like, here's the value you're going to get by watching this video and like, you know, watching through the whole thing and clicking on it. This is the value you're going to get.
Yeah. I mean, if we think about like social media, everything is just trying to suck your time. It just wants your Netflix wants your time. You know, advertisers want your time. Everyone, your time is the most, you know, available resource or not available. It's the most valuable resource.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we're young, we don't really think about it because, you know, we're like, oh, we got all the time in the world. But
right.
I think if you realize that people are taking their time out of their day to watch your video, and that you almost have a responsibility to make it worth it. You don't want to make a video that, like I've seen videos that literally you watch like 8 minutes, whatever, and it says nothing. Like nothing is said in the video. They just keep repeating the same stuff over and over, and nothing's new. It's just recycled. And that's hard because then you feel like, wow, they just kind of wasted my time. And people, there's going to be people out there that hate you and hate your videos and they're like, oh, this is a waste of time. I'm not saying reading into that, but if you make something that you feel like adds, you know, quality, it's just like if you help other people, people will help you out in return. And that's the best community to have, is a generous one. It's by giving to people and not being like, hey, give me, like all this stuff. And I think like one thing I always try to do is I reply to every single comment on my videos, and it takes me hours. I keep my Discord DMs open so people can message me on our server. Yeah. I get weird questions all the time, but I try to respond to everything. I'll even go on Discord voice chat and just talk with people, just because community is so important. And if you invest in your community, I think that's like the number one thing you can do. It's just being in fellowship, being in community, so much stronger than just trying to be like, yeah, like I said, an East-Lev or trying to have an ego or I don't know, any of that stuff. So
yeah, it's really good advice. It's really, really good advice. And speaking of advice, I guess the last thing that I'll ask for us to close out here is, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
That's a tricky one. I think I can't think of the actual quote, but I think the main thing is just fail. Like just go out there and do stuff. Like don't let fear prevent you from trying things. Like you never know how it's going to pan out. I thought this channel was not going to really pan out. I thought it was going to be a waste of time. Or at least that would be a lot of effort for not as much reward. But I think you can't live your life thinking about, it's worse to have what ifs than to actually try something and fail. Because even if you do something, like even if I did this channel and it, you know, I made a couple of videos, it did okay, I still would learn something. You're learning editing, you're learning how to like upload and create thumbnails, all these things. Like everything's an opportunity to learn and to grow. And you know, everything has overlap. Like what you do in one area of your life overlaps to another. So there's no such thing as like wasting time, unless even if you're sitting around doing nothing, like that's not wasting time. At least you're thinking. It's giving your time, your brain, it's helping you learn patience and self-control and not having to overstimulate yourself all the time. So it's like, I think the main thing is just trying things. And like I honestly, I've learned more from failure in my life. I think this is true for most people. You learn more from failure than success, because when you have success, people are like, "Good job, yay!" and then that's it. Like you move on. It's not like people are clapping, you know, when you walk by them in the streets or something like that. It's just like you did it right, awesome. But when you fail, you're like, "Oh man, that wasn't fun. Maybe we shouldn't do this thing. Maybe that was bad." You know, like. Or like, I don't know, like advertising our game and only having like cat photos for our thumbnails or something like that. Like you learn. And I think the main thing is like, there's no shame in failure. We have like this stigma against it. Like, oh, don't be a failure. I think it's good to fail. Yeah. Because that's where you'll branch out, and the places where a lot of success happens is through a bunch of failure, and most people never get there because they're too afraid to fail to get, you know, to make it there. So just get started, start doing stuff, even if it's terrible, if it's awful, who cares? You will get better over time. It's just a matter of being consistent and not, you know, when you fall into the dirt, you dust yourself off and just keep going. So
Well, that's really good advice, man. I totally agree. Well, I know we're a little over an hour, so I think this is a good spot for us to wrap up. So thank you, Mark, for taking the time to talk with me and go over all of these many topics and really interesting things. If folks want to find you, you are Goodgis on YouTube. Is there any other places you want folks to be able to find you, or anything else that you want to plug now that we're at the wrap up stage?
I'm also on Twitter, Goodgis with 3 O's, because someone took it with 2.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know who did, but if you want to see me, I post like a lot of inspiration art on there, mostly other people's stuff, but sometimes I'll put previews of what I'm working on. Or I have a Discord. It's my studio's Discord. You can come out, hang out, chat with me. Yeah, but that's pretty much it. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on here. I love talking about game dev, so it's always an honor.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.